Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Indie Wave Makers podcast, the show where we talk with industry experts in the indie field. And today, I am joined by three experts, Jared, Jeremy, and Jared. Welcome, guys. How are y'all doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, man.
Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And to provide a non-homogeneous perspective because Jared's
It's weird. It's weird.
and
The neutral party. Are you guys ready to dive into this? Do you guys know what the topic is today? You guys all read the script?
But that's a thing, right? Like we're experts in our own field, but this is something that is like emerging and new and completely different for most of us. Like I think, like at the very most, we've indulged in it, we've used it, we've explored it, we've read up on it, watched videos about it, but like we're not the guys who are programming them, right? So we're not like the experts in its execution, but maybe its use.
So for those watching, what we're talking about today are two letters that scare the majority of people, and that is AI. And we want to know a little bit about your guys' experience with it and how you guys utilize it, whether you do or whether you don't, when you guys are working in the games industry. Do you feel that it's a great tool? Do you feel it's dangerous? Are you afraid of it? Do you welcome it? Jared, let's start with you to get some of your thoughts on your experience with AI in the games industry.
So very little, to be honest. We've done a lot of talking about it. Use not so much. Right, it's a little bit of exploration, but in a very light touch. I think, like Jared said, we are not the people who are kind of programming the thing, right? So I think from my perspective, we're at a point where I don't quite understand the kind of all these angles, right? The kind of ethical issues that I think we can talk about, the where the source is from, right? So all that makes it a little bit difficult, I'm a little bit hesitant to kind of really dive right in and like embrace it. So not quite.
Jeremy, what about you? You are designing games. Have you ever utilized any AI?
So what we have dabbled in. So Jared and I are from the same studio, and we're currently making a new game called Commonwealth. I guess I need to give a little bit of introduction to the game so that we can talk about where we thought AI might have been able to help us. So it's a game that essentially is a bureaucracy simulator, right? You play as a government official.
All right.
Right? In a fictional island that is based on, very much based on Singapore's history, where the government wants to grab a lot of land very quickly in order to develop it, right? So the player has to go and meet all these individual landowners and basically decide if they are the legal, legitimate owners or not, and if they are, pay them, and if they're not, just kick them off the land. And what generative AI has been useful for, is of course very much as you would be expected, like fact finding, right? Just giving me the lay of the land, especially regionally, because understanding the various scenarios that actually happen, right, in Singapore with our neighboring countries, very useful. But the moment I need to come down to a specific creative choice, like a character, the background, who they are, how they feel, like what they think about what the government is doing, that's when I realized like it's still down to us. And I hope that I'll be able to argue for the case why we should feel maybe not confident, but optimistic that the creatives still have valuable input.
I like that. And Jared.
Based on that introduction, I think I'm a little scared because it does seem like I'm a little bit more, of the three of us, I'm probably one of the more exposed ones because my first introduction to AI was I think somewhere in late November of 2022. I was talking with a friend of mine, and at the time ChatGPT became this huge thing. And we were sitting down and we were talking about, he was asking me very, it's just sort of a thing to just think about, right? Like he was asking me, like, what do you think about using ChatGPT to do game design? And he did a quick example for me where he went, he used a text to speech and said, ChatGPT, design me give me a GDD that's about this long for this target audience and whatever else there is. And ChatGPT quickly, like it took about, I think 15 minutes for it to generate the whole thing, and it came out pretty long itself. But as you pan through it, two big things came out. Number one, hallucinations in AI is pretty common. If you're not familiar with the idea, that's basically because you have to understand that the tech behind it is that ChatGPT itself doesn't necessarily have context over what it's actually saying. It just guesses what next word should be. So it's sort of a consensus algorithm kind of thing. Like it kind of figures out based on what all the data that it has, this is likely the word that follows the next word, that kind of thing. So it doesn't really understand what it actually is saying. So when you ask it for proposals, it gives you stuff that other people think, or most of other people think are cool, and they don't necessarily gel together really well. So that's a massive problem. And then it starts also pulling out facts and figures very confidently, which are based on nothing. So there's this huge thing when I was seeing it the first time. I was really sort of automatically pretty dismissive of it, but how quickly it generated it is impressive. It managed to do it in 10 to 15 minutes, and it's a full, like, really long proposal. So like assuming that someone was to sit down and just pull the entire breadth of that content out of your caboose, it might have taken them like a good number of hours, just to write and format everything that is there. But all of it is wrong. So from there, like I was sort of interested in the conversation a little bit more. I've had conversations with companies, some people who are pursuing generative AI very specifically for content generation as filler content sometimes. Some people, I've seen people who have used it actually as a final product in their games, which I think anyone who hears about it is automatically triggering. We need a trigger warning somewhere.
Yeah. Okay.
But on its own, there is a lot of it that needs to be discussed. I do think, I don't know whether we can cover everything here today. Some of it is about the ethical aspects of it, and I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I've perused a number of the discussions and debates over it. I'm happy to go over to, like, one of the reasons why I've agreed to come here is also just to find more people to just talk about it, and hopefully through this podcast and everything else, like, more people can engage with it in a sort of a meaningful way.
Actually, yeah, since you mentioned it, we do want to talk about the ethical aspects of it, because I think when people hear AI mentioned, it is essentially a trigger word for a lot of people. I think you mentioned, or you might have mentioned that you wanted to mention or talk about how it appeals to other aspects outside of gaming.
Right.
That might be the case. Why do you think people are just so repulsed when they hear AI?
Okay, so I mean, I've had several conversations in preparation for this podcast with, associates in the industry or, colleagues directly. And I seem to have these two extremes, right? One set seems to be extremely confident about what it is they bring creatively, whether they're artists or engineers. And they can describe to me clearly, like, at certain stages where AI fails and they need to come in to provide context, problem solving, ingenuity. So that group definitely expresses, security and confidence. And then there's another group where, this is anecdotal. I had an art intern apply to get a role with us, and when I reached out to her, immediately she replied saying that, thank you for contacting me, but I want to switch. Can I be a project manager instead? Because I don't believe that now with the advent of AI, I can continue being an artist. So we got people giving up right from the start. Right? So these two extremes, I think obviously is what I want to contend with. I don't think we can go in blindly, right? Assuming that we don't have to adapt and change, or nor should we just give up the ghost entirely before the challenge has even been attempted. So these are the perspectives. With regards to the ethics of it, I'm trying to look at what are the for me, innovative ways artists have been using AI. I'll start with one example. There's a musician, American, her name is Holly Herndon, and she trained an AI model based on her voice. So the ultimate effect is that anyone could be speaking into a mic, and in live, that model generates her voice as your performance. So this allows her, a song to be produced that reaches vocal ranges and performances that she personally couldn't have. Right. And she's made this model free to use.
Right.
And throwing it out there. Anybody could pick it up and then play around with it and then create artworks using her voice. She believes that she's going to chart out a way to properly monetize this, respecting IP, that people who use this will eventually honor, right, the debt, so to speak, right, owed to the originators of these models. I haven't had a chance to have a conversation with her. So I don't really know what a thorough plan is, but I think there's something interesting there about people who are looking at that frontier, right, and asking themselves how they can embrace this scary generative thing, and then chart out an ethical framework that allows, this to be used in a way that's fair for everyone. I'm not clear myself how they would approach it, but they're there and they're taking the risks, and hopefully we'll see what the future brings.
I mean, okay, so the example that you gave just now, what's the name, sir?
Holly Herndon. Yeah.
Holly Herndon, right? Okay, so she's a very good example of how the tech, in theory, can be used. For some people, especially voice actors to some level, right? Like, and this is me talking about strictly being a hypothetical kind of thing, right? Like, you have a natural state of your voice at a specific age. If you want to make it everlast, you want to preserve this quality of your voice, you could, in theory, create a model, train your own model, and create your own model, preserve that, in theory. What's his name again? I suddenly can't remember the guy's, the original voice actor for Darth Vader.
Oh, James Earl Jones. Yeah,
yes, James Earl Jones. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. Like, he actually signed off with Disney saying like, "Hey, I'm going to allow you to model a voice, a voice generator based off my voice," and he's fine with that. And that's because he's old, and like, if they want to keep doing with Darth Vader, it's going to mean, he's not going to be there forever, lah. So that's the whole thing. But one massive elephant in the room that I think, in case anyone who's watching this still don't know and is not privy to that information, like, the most popular generative AI platforms right now, Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, all these are all based off scrape data. That means basically they are the models are trained off images that they did not get the consent of the artists to use. This is very, very simply plagiarism, right? Plagiarism? Anyway, yes. So, you can argue over, like, some people argue, but the computer does so much work that it's basically not the same image, it's generated so many changes and all that kind of stuff. But the problem here is that fundamentally the model that is trained on, it holds value within that architecture of that program, right? So hypothetically, if that image that you're training on, that artist didn't exist, that piece of work that you're referencing did not exist, and it's not contributed to the model, would that model still work? If the answer is no, that means that model holds value within your algorithm, no matter whether you like it or not. Like, if it does not exist, your model wouldn't be able to access it, and therefore it's adding something of value to your system. If you did not get consent from these artists to use it in that manner, then you've basically stolen. And the most common way to run a parallel would be plagiarism, right? Like, you use it and say that it's your own. Use other people's work to claim it as your own. It's not precise vernacular. I will respect anyone who comes up to me and says that no, that's not quite the same thing. I agree, because there is nothing quite like it, right? The technology is so new, we've not quite wrapped our brains around the language that we should be using to discuss it, right? There's just, once again, one of the reasons why I'm so eager to discuss it as much as I can. The closest parallel is this. It is you using something, claiming and using it in such a way where it adds value to what your final product is without giving, I think the right word is compensation to the people who you're taking it from.
Jared, I want to ask you too, since you are, your main focus is consulting right now, is that right? So if I were to come to you and say I want to make my own game right now, and I don't have a team necessarily, it's just me, and I want to, I should ask you, would you suggest that I use any AI tools out there? Would that help me?
Oh, that's a hard question, right? I think for the reasons that Jared and Jeremy mentioned, right? I think there is a whole cluster of issues around ethics, right? Around, do you want to be a decent human being?
Yeah.
And if so, and it's great.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I'm not sure it's as simple as I think some people make it out to be, right?
Yes.
Especially online. I've talked about this,
Yeah.
right? Where it's so obviously wrong. I don't think it's obviously theft. But I think there's also an issue about, is it art, right? Is what you're doing meaningful? Is it, are you just making some sort of mechanical thing that you are a part of, right? Or are you making a game, right? In the traditional kind of meaningful way where you contribute to it and it's a piece of your heart out there in the world, right? If that's what you care about, then there are issues. I think it's not clear it's wrong. It's not clear it doesn't do it, but I think it's not obvious. So maybe the one thing I can think of is, I think people talk about accessibility a lot, right? When it comes to AI, right? So I think this is the heart of the issue, right? That if I'm a single human being with no friends, right? And I make a game, and my skill set is just this, right? AI makes it a lot more accessible to make a game in a way that I wouldn't have had been able to before. But I think the history of the world shows us that accessibility can be a little bit of a double-edged sword, right? I guess I'm thinking of like what's become more accessible in the last 2,000 years or 10 years, right? Where there was a time in human history where calories weren't very accessible, right? People had to hunt, right? You had to grow crops. It was hard, right? And you could eat what you couldn't grow up from the ground. And now calories are accessible, and it's not great for us, right? It's take a toll on our physical health, right? For a lot of people. What's the other big thing that is in my head clearly has become more accessible is kind of the democratization of voice, right? There was a point where unless you were a politician or religious leader, no one heard you. And now social media, like a channel like this, right? Nobody's like me talk to the world, right? And that's got some good things, right? Now you have people who otherwise would never have been heard say things, but also we know that a lot of issues with everyone talking, right? Social media has taken toll on mental health, physical health, all sorts.
So that means if I were to kind of build up what you're trying to describe, like Pierre, that almost two ethical questions, right? One is the legal framework in which AI can be legitimately used. The other is ethics of another sort, which is what we want to use it for, right? What are ways that AI can actually contribute to human endeavor, artistic endeavor, versus just this democratic flood of potentially less than praiseworthy products.
So if I may, right? Like I think what Jared is getting at, and it's really weird for me to say out loud. I think what Jared is trying to get at is he's trying to make an argument where there is a question of like, hey, if I do not have the skills for this, but there is a thing that I want to produce, AI allows me to do that now. Is at least the argument that he's trying to get. And the examples that you've cited so far are mostly about actually gaining access in such a way where it's plentiful enough that it's beyond what is necessary. I've heard that argument before, and I understand why it appears at its surface a reasonable argument. But the problem with it, right, is that it's not that the skills were necessarily outside your grasp. Like if in the examples, and I do apologize if I sound like I'm cherry picking. Sorry, if I feel like I'm hammering into your example a little bit too hard. But in examples that you were giving, for one, calories has to do with survival, so that's a separate issue. But that itself isn't. It's about whether it's immediately within your access. It's not like you could generate calories spontaneously without food from anywhere else.
Okay.
So it was necessary for someone else to generate that food and for you to buy it from someone else, and the mass you could
Yeah.
you could, but if you just physically couldn't because you don't have a leg or an arm, or you are actually like you for some reason belong in a desert where there's nothing for you to gain access to and all that kind of stuff, it's a different thing in that space, but when you're talking about accessibility for creative endeavors, I hate the phrase. I hate the minds the mind. The frame of mind that I have to set myself into to go into that topic. But very specifically, when you're looking at creative endeavors, and you can argue over this, but it is not a matter of survival, and it is more about skills than anything else. You know what I mean? Like AIs are not giving you access to skills to the skills that you cannot learn on your own. You can argue over how far that ceiling can be that you can get and how much time you would take to get there, but that's not something that's outside reasonable reaches of effort and time.
Sure.
You get what I'm getting at?
I think we're on the same page about this. So let me finish my argument. Actually, I was going the same direction, so it's okay. So I think we're on the same page. I think right, but with a bit of a twist. I think so. My sense is that the kind of increased accessibility that AI gives to us, right, gives to, if you are someone with an idea, right? I can't code. I could learn to code. You're right. I could learn to paint. Right? I could, but I haven't because I'm a child, because I'm busy, whatever it is, right? Or I'm just not artistically inclined, right? Or whatever it is. I could still make something, and that's accessibility. That's great. And I think that's surely a good that comes out of that. Right, in the same way that surely goods that came out of increased access to food, increased access to voice, they're clear goods, right? It's just not clear to me that there aren't corresponding and potentially huge harms, right? And in this case, I agree with you that with the food case, with the voice case, that's a little different. In this case, what I'm worried about, I think, is a bit of to be a little bit like highfalutin, is a little bit of a spiritual harm, right? It's a little bit of, it's a little bit of I think it's hard, it's so easy. It's a bit junk foody, right? It's hard to kind of bring yourself to this. Once you learn it, why would you learn to code? Why would you learn to have art? Right? Because it's so much harder, and there's such a big step to get to anywhere close to as decent as AI, as mediocre as it is, right? And so we become lazy, I think, in the same way we have for food, in the same way we have for voice. So I'm a bit worried. It's not clear to me that this is the only direction we could go.
Oh no, but
it's a danger, I think.
Oh no, that's a really established problem. As it stands right now, there's reports going that in the next few years, the majority of the internet are most likely going to be AI generated content. So I can't cite the numbers because I really don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know that there are a number of reports that are currently based on the existing trend of AI content that's coming out, that the majority of the internet will be just completely subsumed by AI generated stuff. Subsumed directly.
It's a little bit of, I don't know whether optimism is the right word, but there have been recent academic studies on exactly what would happen if models were only trained on AI.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely hilarious.
Yeah, and what they found is that the models collapse. They just start failing because without introduction of meaningful new input, it just starts devolving into the hallucination, into the recursion, into just the mess. So to that point of whether there's anything spiritually fulfilling about it. Okay, so I'm gonna speak from the perspective of someone who is in game design, and what I see as the kind of creative project I'm interested in. Another applicant claiming to be able to do art and programming, send in a portfolio, and I quickly checked with my artist because she had 500 wallpapers, all looking similar. And then all of her games were generic games like Mahjong tile matching using her art. And immediately it clocked that this is just not particularly creative, interesting, or meaningful. I don't see what this person is contributing, from themselves in terms of an idea, in terms of a skill set. So maybe it's so maybe it's a little bit naive, right? But at least so far, it seems to me like from my eye test, it's quite easy to spot when it's just not interesting. AI generated works and derivatives. So if I were to talk about that, can we aspire to something more noble? I hope one side of it is actually just people hopefully getting bored or being able to detect when ultimately the novelty is gone.
Jared, you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you're comfortable to share this or talk about it, but we're in terms of game design, I think you had mentioned that you did know somebody that was working on a game, and I think you said something about they concluded their game entirely using AI. Was that right? Did I?
Oh no. That wasn't
I
the
misheard
case. So basically, well, yes, sort of. Basically, what happened was that there was a project around. I really don't want to name names.
Yeah.
But basically, it was a finished product. And I want to emphasize on the term product because there's monetization involved. And how it works is that the images that are generated are all AI generated. That means basically there is no touch up per se. I use the word touch up per se because it's not like they didn't process the images. They still had to. But for the large part, the characters are mostly as they were generated. If not, there's some human touch up along the way. So that's at least it. So where was the question going?
So the question is like when working on that,
Yeah.
what type of time was ultimately saved from this person choosing to go that route rather than say generation?
I would argue it's rarely about time. It's more about budget than anything else. Because if you can't draw, you are never going to be taking the time to draw. So it's never about that one. But what it costs you would likely be the budget you have taken to pay a proper artist to draw the characters that you need to do, and to communicate with the artist very specifically through the iterative process what exactly you needed and all that kind of stuff. I still remember in the early days of when I think DALL-E was showing up and stuff like that, there were some artists who were talking about how in order for AI to replace artists, clients need to be able to tell explicitly what they need. And everyone's jumping to the conclusion that, our jobs are safe because they'll never do that. Right now, that skill is something that some people are developing, which itself is really ironic if you think about it, because rather than to learn how to draw yourself, you're learning just how to prompt.
The AI whisperer.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you're still spending an inordinate amount of hours on this, but like you would rather do it to prompt yourself than to figure out how to talk to people. But so it's that. So they did that as a finished product. I personally there's one we were talking about ethics earlier about it, and how to use it and all that kind of stuff. We were sort of mentioning about how as a tool with the available systems that are in place, using it as sort of a glorified search engine is kind of handy. Because what it does is really that it consolidates a lot of stuff, right? Like if you needed a specific pose or composition for you to reference, for you to draw, having a system that can pull from millions and millions of images so that you can have something to refer to or something weird and wacky to refer to could be pretty handy, right? But to use that in your final product is where the problem is, because right now, once again, all that images that are scraped are taken from people without consent, and they don't see a dime of whatever money that you're making on either end. This isn't all about money, but it is something that hurts the artists that are affected by all of this, who their bottom lines, or basically their pockets are being affected by all of this. But ultimately, if you're making money off other people's works, you should probably be paying the people who are helping you out, that kind of thing. And this isn't supposed to be DALL-E, Midjourney, or Stable Diffusion. Though maybe they still deserve a penny or two for, the work they put in an engine, blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. But yeah.
What was that?
No, I mean, because this discussion for me dovetails so much with age-old questions about artistic inspiration, right? It's
Right.
Every media, paint, film, writing.
Right.
Everyone basically says, when they're honest with themselves, yes, I am in a very real way pilfering from the artists that I love, people
Right.
that have inspired me. What if the philosophy, right?
Right.
Everything is a footnote to, Plato. And I don't know if it's not this concern of yours is not in a way some variant. We haven't so except when it's really direct, right? Let's say the academic works, right? Like an essay that you can literally
Right.
word for word match. Sure, those are very obvious instances, but yeah, I don't know if in a way naturally all of these forms of media and economic systems that have developed around them have found a way to cope with the fact that yes, works borrow, are inspired by,
So-
reference, call back to, and yet
Right. So like some people are going about how like there's only 7 stories. I write for a living at some level, and like some people are going like, oh, there's only 7 types of stories and stuff like that. All the great stories are done, all that kind of stuff. But here, at least for me, there's a very interesting line, and I was using the word plagiarism earlier. Need to learn how to pronounce that word properly. But
With
is it plagiarism?
J,
Right?
Yeah.
It's with a J. Okay,
Yeah,
plagiarism. Anyway, so plagiarism itself is the reason why I use that, right? Is for me in my head, I'm sort of I use sort of a small litmus test. If you did not specifically have Midjourney and all that, can you, given a reasonable amount of time, reproduce what you are saying is your work? I think for me that is the best sort of like my working litmus test. I'm looking for an alternative, but it feels to me like a good working litmus test. So if you're an artist, for example, you call yourself an artist, right? And if I don't have Midjourney, if I don't have the digital tools, if you give me a pencil and color pencils and whatever else there is, odds are I can still somewhat reproduce what I present as my piece of work, my artwork. The same applies to a writer, right? And same technically applies to a programmer as well. Like if I don't have ChatGPT to do my one, I can still somewhat produce Python scripts and whatever else there is, right? That's not the same of the people who are prompters, I think is the right vernacular for it, right? Because prompters, once they're deprived of these engines, these systems and stuff like that, they can't reproduce what they call their works. You know what I mean?
Can I jump in with two comments?
Sure.
Two quick comments here. So I really like, I think, what you're saying.
Oh.
So it strikes me that to bring it back a little bit to what I was talking about kind of corrosion of the soul, right? Just to bring this right. Sorry, I'm not spiritual. But it seems to me that just if you read the internet at all, we know that people are wildly misperceive, overestimate their own abilities.
Right.
In all sorts of things. If you watch American Idol, you know
Right.
this, right? The Voice, right? Whatever it is.
It's a
People.
term for it. I can't remember. Like
Dunning-Kruger.
it's
among
basically-
other things. Yeah. So that's one
Yeah.
part of it, right? But people widely overestimate how good they are at singing, at humor, at driving, whatever it is. I think it's very, very easy for anybody, this is not a bad person thing, this is any of us to slip into thinking, I could have done that. So sure, I can use Midjourney because I could draw that, I could have thought this plot up, but you can't. The point is for most of us, I imagine, it's an easy mistake to make. It's motivated, right? Yeah, sure, I'm this good, but it's hard to say, right? So that's, I think, a danger, right? This litmus test, I think it's objectively perhaps a good one, but given human nature, it becomes a little bit hard to apply, I suspect. The other half of it I wanted to say is something I've forgotten, so that's fine. I had a second point, but I forgot. That's okay. So just that. I'll come back to it. Yeah, I know, I'm blanking.
like when it comes to AI in particular, right? Like you're talking about AI slops and all that kind of stuff, where it feels very generic and everything else. There's a lot of people who can't tell good content from mediocre content. I'm not even talking about bad content, because bad content is like, yeah, it's obvious, right? But mediocre content and good content. And the part that is annoying and scary and not really good for the industry, I do believe, is that a lot of money is going to go there. Not necessarily even consumer money, because consumers tend to be split between two. You're either the type that recognizes good stuff, or you follow people who recognize good stuff. You know what I mean? Like you listen to a reviewer and it's like, no, this is good, and he explains why, because he knows what he likes and stuff like that, and that's where all the money goes. Why it's scary is because a lot of VC money is going to go into this kind of mediocre stuff, because a lot of VCs, whether you like it or not, are not people who can tell the difference between good content and mediocre content. You know?
Or the framework is just what's a safe bet, right?
Correct, exactly. Or you fall into that space where everything's what's a safe bet. So you're going to see like your 15th version of some generic first-person shooter, you know, and stuff like that. And that's what the games industry is sort of like somewhat evolved into.
That's like the problem of having access to too many calories.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Full circle, man. Full circle. Perfect
And then,
full circle.
So what we need is AI Ozempic. Like. Maybe.
You need to figure out what good calories are, man. Like, but yeah, it's
Yeah,
it
what
is,
are the
right?
calories?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is, right?
And I definitely don't mean to offer this as anything definitive. Very much a subjective perspective from what I want to take out from engaging with artwork. And if I'm going to summarize it, I get the most out of engagement when I perceive intention.
Right.
And that, whether it's music or writing or film or games, I already start with the opening assumption that when a choice is made, there is a vision, there's an idea, there's an emotion, there's a something of that person that wants to be expressed.
That's not true
And
for a
that's,
lot.
I know. but so that's where I get
Right.
out of, right? And so that's why it's easy for me to kind of look at something that comes up from AI and just skirt it and just go, I know that I'm not going to get
Right.
anything satisfactory because there is no intention
Right.
behind whatever is being generated here. So, of course, that's me. I built this taste, and I can't take a stance that it has to be the same approach for everyone else, right? Everyone has a different engagement. Maybe what I would hope for is that, again, people start introspecting about when they do have satisfactory engagements with different works of art, and then realize, I do have this particular element that I want to engage with that AI can't easily duplicate or replace. And if that kind of self-awareness starts developing, I think that's a good thing that maybe AI can bring about. Like, this just isn't satisfactory. What?
It could go the other way, right? So we could develop the awareness, after all this conversation and society, and maybe I come to learn that actually I don't mind AI, right? I don't need this human artist. I don't care about attention. I come to realize, right? I could, right? There's no reason why it's got that way.
Yeah.
I mean, so just to play devil's advocate to the conversation about art and stuff like that, right? Because the thing is that if AI can mimic it well enough, right? Right now, it's still a developing thing. And now it's getting to the stage where it can roughly mimic human speech patterns, something that we would never have imagined a decade ago, right? Like, if it starts doing that, and it can do that now, like, just project about a decade from now, if not 20, 30 years from now, that kind of thing. Like, if it starts being able to mimic these kind of things well enough, I think the question then becomes about how do we keep making something new? And I think that's at the heart of what you were getting at when it comes to like working with artists and stuff like that, because AI can only learn from what is behind us because it can't predict what's going to be next. I was watching a video before this about I think the death of the internet, very specifically. It's a cute little thing. And one of the ideas that were presented was that internet memes, the weird things like gyat and skibbity toilet and things like that, the stuff that comes out of so much of our left brain, like so extreme end of our left brain, are the only things that are going to save us from what essentially is going to be like AI sloth.
Wait, why?
Because they're so weird and like abnormal, right? That AI would never be able to produce it on their own. That is the ultimate identifier of humanity. It is weird to think about it, but Skibbity Toilet is an icon of this generation. You know what I mean? And that is a poorly rendered face sticking out of a toilet bowl.
So we've talked a lot about the spiritual aspects of AI, the ethical aspects and whatnot. But there has to be some good, some light at the end of the tunnel that maybe some people are not seeing yet. After you're making your game, there's got to be some way you can use the AI tool to your advantage, whether it be through marketing the game, however ideas you guys might be able to come up with. Do you see that? Is there any specific potential that maybe is outside of the realm of the artistic approach that you could see this being beneficial towards game development?
Well, I'll start. so that I can leave the hard part, giving a more sophisticated response.
Oh, is that the plan? Oh no!
So, go.
Completely
So,
followed your-
in order to continue production on our game, I've had to rely on ChatGPT to help me with translation, right? Because our game is meant to be set within our region, and so therefore some characters are going to be speaking in their own native language, whether it's Javanese or Thai or Vietnamese, and I don't have a translator on hand. And I think the reason why I'm okay with using ChatGPT to help me with the translation portions for now is because I know that they are purely placeholder. And every time I share a script or dialogue with a native speaker, immediately the first reaction is, yeah, this is yuck, this doesn't sound good, or doesn't sound right. And so that gives me comfort that great, I've got a placeholder. It helps me communicate what the intention of this character is supposed to be doing, or with the kind of maybe a general idea of tone or characteristic or plot of the story that this character is participating in. But the professionals, the people who have the important experience and knowledge and taste and know that they can contribute that next phase, which is what will allow it to appear authentic, interesting, and work as a product. So the easy answer is optimism. Yeah, it can help us maybe with the initial steps, as long as we hold ourselves accountable to the fact that it is just placeholder, and we still want to invite authentic creativity into the process to bring us to the final state.
So it's really it's cute because the one that you're referring to, it's basically automation, right? And it's really funny because in preparation for this session, I did go back online to reread a lot of pages that I was like reading in the last few years and stuff like that. And one thing that that was interesting to me is very specifically about how we're talking about AI as though it's something new. The way it's kind of used in theory, like if you're a tech guy, strictly speaking, AI and the algorithm that, the same thing that's governing YouTube and Google and all that kind of stuff are the same thing. Like it's just about how much more, like the different types of algorithms that you're using, the heuristics that you're using just differ. It just changes this one.
Okay.
It's like because the tech becomes so common, we stop thinking about it as an AI, that kind of thing. And that's how some of them have kind of discussed it. Now, specific to the topic that Mike, you were mentioning, right? Like about whether it can help. The fact is we already sort of do it to some level. A lot of us do data-driven like game design where we are taking like mass QA testing and say, oh, this is where we can optimize, or this is a problem and this needs to be fixed and all that kind of stuff. But AI does these forms of like basically like large scale data consolidations, or if not like trying to find bug fixing and all that kind of stuff. Like they do these kind of overly repetitive stuff really well. But at the end of the day, when it comes to finding a solution, it always needs a human element to come in and fix it. A large reason for that is because at the end of the day, right, any AI that you engage is not trained to the specific product that you are using. Like you guys are making a new game, and when you are making a new game, the AI doesn't understand the context of your game, and it'll never be able to until you feed it with enough information. And by the point that you feed it with enough information for it to understand the context of your game, you have a completely different program. So that's kind of the thing that's going on here. Like it's great to do sort of like data consolidation. It's really useful in that, but strictly speaking, the advertising industry is already using that. Facebook and like Alphabet, which is the parent company for Google, in case anyone doesn't know, already does that very naturally. They have systems in place. QAs, I know for a fact that some companies have AI-driven like playtesting, where they just have AIs just repeat steps over and over again to find bugs and issues and stuff like that. They very specifically give it a set of commands, just repeat the process over and over again until something breaks. You can find videos on YouTube of people training specifically AIs to try to find the fastest way around tracks, speed stuff and everything else. So it's not to say a lot of this stuff cannot be done. It's great to give you better context about your game, but ultimately they need to be trained in your game. There's no generic AI that can do this.
There is something very powerful, I think, about the sort of thing you're talking about, especially for indie game designers, I think, right, who don't have the budget otherwise to. So I think we are a bit of a privileged position that we can consider and will kind of bring on real people to kind of do these translations for us. But not everybody, I think, has a luxury, right? If you have a great idea for a game, you're just a starting person. There's something very powerful about AI giving you the ability to put yourself out there. And especially powerful, I think, given that we don't normally think of a good game. There are many things that are adjacent to good games, right? You need a good idea, you need the kind of craft of it, design a good game, and then there's all the other stuff, like giving pitches to publishers, which maybe as a game designer, I'm just awful at. I don't know how to write something. I can design a hell of a game, but I can't pitch, right? AI can help, right? Can kind of get things out there. There's something very powerful about kind of moving from the kind of core skill sets of a game designer and helping you bridge that, even if it's generic, I think, right? So even that, even if your pitches are not the best, getting you at the table is quite something, I think, for a number of people.
All right, so we've seen trends in the past. There was a big craze. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but an NFT and crypto craze that was going around.
Never heard of it.
And, okay, I'll educate you in a little bit. But no, like once that thing was really booming, kind of post 2020, it went further away from just finances and it started making its way into games, where games start, if you played games, you could earn crypto or you could unlock NFTs, however they work. But a lot of games were incorporating it. And now, we're kind of in a wave where AI, although you've kind of mentioned like this has been around 20 years, even longer, but the way we're seeing it utilized now is a lot of people are kind of even bragging about including AI in their games. Is this something that you think indie developers should be kind of moving towards to kind of keep up with this industry trend? Is this something that you see could potentially, I don't want to say fall off, but maybe not necessarily the right thing to be chasing? What kind of advice would you have for somebody, again, like myself, that's just starting with my game right now? Should I be? No. Yes. For the sake of argument, though, like, do you think this is a healthy place to be moving? Should I be focusing on finding ways to incorporate AI into the game?
I mean, I'm no prophet, right? I honestly don't think anybody knows, right? Anybody who thinks they know or says for sure something, I probably, I'm not sure that there's very good evidence one way or the other, conclusive evidence one way or the other. My perspective is that the strength of the indie game development scene has always, at least to me, has always been about experimentation and kind of uniqueness, right? We have a niche, right? In a way that the AAAs have a harder time, kind of just because they're much bigger bureaucracies, right? And I think there's something to that. So no shame on you if you want to just make like gacha games and just earn money. That's a living, that's fine. But I think there are a lot of indie game developers out there, right? Who really kind of feel for this as art, right? They want to do something with this, right? This product, right? And for that, I'm not sure that the AI or no AI question is the one we should be approaching. I think the question is experimentation or not is the question. And given if you want to experiment, and I think this is a worthwhile thing to do, if you can have the kind of financial stability that lets you experiment, then I think some of that experimentation will look like AI. Try weird things, right? Try having strange AI characters in your thing that email you pizza or something, right? Kind of go outside the world, steal your Facebook profile, become you in the game. It can be super weird, can be super semi-illegal, right? Right? Because you're semi-illegal,
Right? This
in some jurisdictions, right? So I mean, Because you could, right? As a small indie, I mean, you might just be local in some particular jurisdiction that doesn't have those particular rules that EU might have. You can experiment.
Can we not?
Instead of oil rigs in the middle of the international waters, they have like programming centers. Like,
Please no. Please no. Do not play this game in
no, like,
It's a serious point. It's a serious point, right?
exactly.
It's a serious point,
It's
right?
true, it's true.
The triple A's don't have the luxury.
Yeah.
The triple A's don't have the luxury of doing anything that offends anybody in any part of the world, which means they must play in, by and large, the big markets of America, Europe, China, right? Sometimes China. Indies don't have that constraint, I think, which is one reason why we get to be super experimental. If I'm just releasing it in Southeast Asia, just in Singapore, just in wherever it is, right? I don't have to care about EU laws about privacy, right? Because they're not morally correct. We don't know, right? If the laws don't exist here, we can try something. And that's that's rules. Right. I know.
Yeah, I do.
You might not love it. So I'm saying it's open to. I think it's open to the particular kind of you, right? It's up to you as an indie. You don't answer to Blizzard, corporate, right? So I think it's one half of it. So I think experiment. I think AI is a rich avenue for experimentation. Ethical issues aside, right? So I think this is something you should grapple with yourself as an indie game developer, whether what kind of person you want to be, how comfortable you are, possibly plagiarizing or stealing somebody else's work.
I'll do the euphemistic version. Okay. What Jared is talking about in terms of experimentation, right? So we talked a little bit earlier about the musician Holly Herndon. There is this. You mind if I just check and edit the name of this artist?
You have no.
Oh, I know her. Win Chun, right?
Korean, Canadian?
Yeah,
I know
American,
her.
I think. Korean American. I don't know.
Okay, yeah.
Shit, I should have put on the bio as well. But she came to Singapore and then she performed, I think, for SIFA, right? And what she did was, again, similarly, train an AI and robot based on her own drawing style and fed it as much data as she could possibly do. And then have it as a companion create art alongside her live, right, in front of us. And it's reacting to her in a way that, yes, is trained on her behavior, but of course it's in a data set that's so limited that it's still going to be random and strange. So in that spirit of experimentation, it looks like when people, if people approach using AI that way, it's fertile. And that's when they have to have a vision or a question they're trying to address. There's another visual artist that wanted to point out that current AI models trained to recognize faces exclude, for instance, LGBTQ people in drag, and try to train AI on that. And that's when you get the experimental, strange, interesting, novel works of art being generated. So I do hope that what someone who is thinking about it from the perspective of independent gaming holds on to that independent spirit, right? We're not here to even strategically just ape, what the marvels of the gaming industry world are doing, right? That there's almost maybe again naive, a little bit of a mission as an independent developer to hold strong, right, and strive for that idealistic notion that you're meant to create something again nourishing, interesting, fresh from you that you can share with the world and for them to engage with.
So before we let you guys go, just thank you so much for sharing your time and discussions and beliefs. It's hopefully everybody's going to be able to digest this and have a new profound understanding and appreciation, maybe lack thereof.
I think at the most, there's a lot of talking points here that you really just have to read up on your own and like watch more videos on. Like
maybe we're just functioning like bad AI, right? We create
we are.
a bad example of a conversation at
Wikipedia. These are still
use it as a launch pad.
Like you need to read the footnotes.
Well, when the video comes out, it's going to be different voices, different words. But can you just let everybody know? We'll start with you, Jared, what you're working on right now, where people can find more information on you.
Ooh, yeah, sure. So Jared and myself, we're both with a studio called Landemue Games. And right now, currently, we're working on a game called Commonwealth. It is a game set on a fictionalized version of Singapore, thinly veiled, and during the era of the 1960s when we just arrived at independence. And you play as a government official trying to help this young fledgling nation hit the ground running, modernize, the Singapore story that we all know and love. And what you're meant to do is to facilitate this modernization, go around to all the citizens living in their homes, working on their farms, and telling them, I'm sorry, we need to build a highway, a hospital, a school, an airport.
You loving this?
Loving this. Yeah.
What you experience?
It is.
And so for the greater good, you're going to have to vacate. Now prove that you're the real owner. So it is a mix of papers, please, and adding that dash of hopefully interesting, authentic, local culture and experience to help us live a little bit of that history in an interesting way. And time for National Day.
And where can people find information on that?
So we do have a Steam page up and running, and please go ahead and visit and
Commonwealth.
Space Wealth, Common Space Wealth, we'll be part of Gamescom Asia as well. So we'll be presented as part of the indie wave.
We'll be there.
So if you happen to be attending, come and say hi. So that's us.
Right.
So Jared,
Yes.
what are you possibly working on right now, and that you are able to share with us?
And okay, so I'm a freelance writer. For the most part, I worked one of the few games that I worked on, and you can actually actively check out was Metronomics NSR and No Straight Roads. I contributed some level writing for them, small amount, but I'm working on some of their later projects right now. So that's a huge thing, and when it comes out, you get to see that. That's great. In my free time, I stream. You can check me out on YouTube. I'm under BIMG Streams. That's BIMJI. Yes, I have to think about it. Streams. I stream every 2 weeks myself, talking about geeks and our experiences growing up in Southeast Asia, exploring our geekdoms and all that kind of stuff. So so check me out if you have the time.
Thank you guys so much. I hope you all
thank
have
you.
fun. This is great.
Yeah.
I am going to get in touch with my spirit now. All right, y'all. Thank you guys for watching.
Thank you.